Garth, it's good to be with you.
Good to be with you.
I remember the first time I met you was at Sussex University. I was a student and you had just graduated from theological college. I think you were even wearing a clerical collar, I can't remember. But how did you get into singing, into music? Was it something that had preceded theological college?
May I just say, Stephen, that I remember you, even though we're going back all that time, because when it came to signing your album, you asked me to sign something Christian, not like I was putting on the other ones. So I did. The getting into music was very interesting because I was finding, as when I was in my teens, that I loved music, whether it was rock or folk or whatever. And I was actually kind of informed by my parents that rock music and so on was not really ideal. So I would produce gospel records in the house and play them and see what they thought of them. And there was a teacher at my school who I talked to about this. He was a Christian guy, and he said, well, music is a gift from God. And it just changed my attitude. And that term in school, they had a thing called the Glee Club. It was like a rock and roll club. And I kind of headlined at that. Why? And I'd put together a band. And I remember walking down the aisle from the back of the hall to the Roy Orbison song Pretty Woman, and the lead I walked down to and then sang that one. So first of all, I was kind of singing for my own enjoyment and for the fun of it, and that was very good fun. But also I wanted to reflect something of my faith in the music. And I found that when I was at university, I started writing songs. And
what did you study?
I did a general degree in English, history and theology. And that was really useful for songwriting. Quite valuable. And I wrote a lot at university and started singing like in folk clubs and so on. And I was asked to do some things in churches. So it kind of built up.
And then theological college, you felt called to Christian ministry.
Yes, I did. And it was, again, I was being asked to do more singing that was picking up the Christian message, and I was very happy to do that. And then when I got ordained, I was ordained in Canterbury Cathedral, and the Archbishop at the time, Michael Ramsey, he came and sat down next to me and had a little chat, and we watched Top of the Pops together. He wanted to know what these what is this music? So he was a very bright and thoughtful guy, and also in his quiet way quite political. And so it was a discussion that I sort of cherished, that chatting with the Archbishop over Top of the Pops. And he said to me, you must do it, you must carry on, you must keep the singing going. I thought, oh, that's nice.
Where did justice come into your singing? What was it that became pivotal?
You know, in the music I was listening to, there was a range, and in perhaps the folk end of some of that music, it was quite political, whether I was hearing Joan Baez or some other folk singer. And then when I went around the folk clubs in the Durham area, I was up at Durham Cathedral, at Durham University, it was often political, and it started to make me think that way. I sang my gospel songs, and it was accepted very happily. But I realized that there were certain stories that I wanted to get into the songs. And that went back to when I was about 17. I went to St. Paul's Cathedral to hear Martin Luther King speak. Because I was kind of thinking through Christianity, really. And there were certain things that hadn't clicked together for me, and I went to hear him, and suddenly it became a circle. It was like I could say, oh, okay, and it was the social justice aspect, that Jesus was an activist, was what I realized, and that I recognized we needed to reflect. If we were to walk in the footsteps of Jesus, we needed to have some activism. And so I started to pick up, quite slowly, certain social justice issues. When I say quite slowly, I would often think in my mind, how do I reflect what Martin Luther King was doing and saying? And it took me a time. But if you look at the albums, you'll see that things are sneaking in and becoming more open, more frank, and taking up issues.
So when did Palestine come onto your radar? What was it that ignited that interest?
I was sitting in Uganda, and I was in a friend's house. He was the Bishop of Namirembe in Kampala. His name was Mizeri Kauma, and we'd been at university together. That's how we'd built the friendship. And he wasn't there. I was just sort of sitting in there reading some stuff, and I picked up a magazine which came from somewhere, I think in Uganda or maybe in Africa, and it was talking about the Palestinians. I thought, I don't know anything about these people. And if I did, I'd just picked up negative stuff that was in the media. So I was shocked, and I thought I must pursue this. And strangely, when I got back in Heathrow, they had a bookstall there, and one of them was a book called Blood Brothers, which was by Elias Shakur, who later became Archbishop of Galilee. And that book was an eye-opener for me, and how his village had been, they'd been driven out of their village, and the whole sort of cleansing of Palestinians from so many villages. And I recognized that there's a story to be told here. And so we invited Elias Shakur to come to the Greenbelt Festival and to tell the story of his people and what happened in his village and so on. And he came, and in the middle of the worship service on the Sunday, he came up to me and said, we must do this in Galilee. And I thought,
And that was your first trip?
That was the first trip. So we went to Galilee, and I was officially invited by the Archbishop of Jerusalem,
Samir Kafiti?
Samir Kafiti at that time.
He called us his boys.
Yes. he was very supportive of us, and the Church Mission Society had they heard me singing a song that I wrote before I'd ever been there, and the song was called "Where Is the Land of Palestine?" And they said, "Where are you getting this from?" And I told them I'd written it, and I was fascinated. They said, "Well, you must come. We've been working there in various ways for years. Come and meet the church, meet the community there, and hear the story of the Palestinian people." Well, that's how it all worked out. Invitation from the bishop, and away we went.
And bringing it right up to the present, your latest CD and book is about Palestine and other parts of the world as well. It's focusing on Easter.
It's actually about Easter, and pointing out that Easter is for all the year round. It's not just an Easter album for Easter. I've got a little booklet that goes with the album as well, and it says on the booklet, the Easter Revolution is for life, not just for Easter. And I enjoyed doing this. I did it during lockdown, and when you say it's about Palestine, it was about things that were happening at the time that I was writing the material. And there's a couple of songs on there, one of which is called When Resurrection Came to Palestine. And it's about the really it's taking the story of what happened way back in time with Jesus and saying, could there be some kind of resurrection now amongst the community for the Palestinian people? And
Resurrection in what sense?
in the sense of life, the idea of life returning, which I'm using really the Jesus story, thinking of resurrection. But I wanted to think, yes, but certain aspects of resurrection in this sense is a community that had been driven out, lost their land, thousands made refugees. Could that community rise again within that land? And so I picked up that theme using two verses about different artists who had painted pictures, one of whom has painted the front cover of this, or it's a painting of hers that I put on the front cover. She's called Malak Matar and comes from Gaza. And that's one of the songs. And then there's another song called In the City of Jerusalem. And that's about ethnic cleansing that's going on in Jerusalem at this present moment. And I pick up particularly the words of Mohammed El-Kurd and his family, which I'd heard on a Zoom, and he was highly articulate. And I put together some of the things he had been saying. And I'm a canon of St. George's Anglican Cathedral in Jerusalem. It's very close to the area where this ethnic cleansing is going on. And it seemed to me that it was important to try to reflect, this is happening now, this is happening today. How are we going to support this community? Or are we just going to let them be driven out again? So those are a couple of the songs in here. And then...
You've got some from other places in the world, particularly
Yes.
Japan, with the Pope's
That's right.
visit to Nagasaki.
That's right, yeah. The Pope went down to Nagasaki. I thought that would be a catchy song title. And in 2019, the Pope went down to Nagasaki, and his speech was fantastic. It was a call to the world. It was a call to the world to reject violence, to reject nuclear weapons. And I use his words in the song because they couldn't be stronger. And I felt it was important to do it. And things have got far more... I didn't think there would be a war in Europe when the song came out, but there was and is. And the way in which our society and so many societies are accepting violence, and instead of trying to bring peace, for instance, to Ukraine and the conflict there, there's a sort of, we'll get you weapons, you can have weapons. And they say, oh, we need weapons, we can beat Russia then. And I think this doesn't seem to be going the right way. We need peacemakers. And so this song, I think, particularly reflects that attitude of a commitment to peace. Let's work together so that we don't have huge horror stories. And of course, Putin has even been saying he would use nuclear weapons. I mean, that's very frightening. That wasn't being said even at the time I wrote the song, even though it's always hinted at. So I felt that the theme of peace, non-violence was very important for the album. And increasingly, actually, over the last few years, I felt that. And so you'll notice songs sneaking in.
And the booklet provides the words of the songs
Yes.
and some other devotional material, quotes
That's
and
right.
so on.
And there's one or two poems and things, so that we've got other viewpoints that creep in. And in fact, yes,
You want to read us one?
no, I want to check what what one is. There's a lovely poem. I was going to, when resurrection came to Palestine, I thought there was Yeah, I can't quite remember
Doesn't matter.
what one I was going to point out, but there's a poem in the book called The Easter Revolution, because I asked Martin Rowe, who's a very good poet, if he could write something with the title The Easter Revolution. And he wrote, so I'll read you a little bit of that. The Easter Revolution will not be televised. It is not captured on CCTV because it is captured in the heart. It is not a big event in history. It is too big for history and also too small. The Easter Revolution may not even be recorded, but it is always sung, often by those who history forgets to remember. The Easter Revolution is a beautiful disguise. It is brought to you by a woman in a flowing green dress, facing down the riot police, and a shirt-sleeved man standing before a line of tanks, but also in the patience of the person serving you on the checkout at Tesco, and your neighbour's love for her child, the one people name different. It is brought to you by those who are seldom heard and routinely overlooked. In the fields, someone picking coffee; on the seas, someone in an exodus; and in the forest, a nun, gunned down for protecting the trees while reciting the Beatitudes. We're not burying you, says her fellow revolutionaries at the funeral, we're planting you. And so it goes on, but finishes with this. The Easter Revolution takes no one by force, except the force of love, which is no force at all, and the greatest force of all. It is the revolution we all long for, but can't quite name, the one that is undated because it is every date that ever was, the one that is usually unseen, but always, at every moment, hiding in plain sight. Thank you, Martin Rowe.
Thank you. And if folk want to get hold of the booklet along with the CD, how do they do that?
They can do that through my website, which is garthhewitt.org, and that's probably the best way to do it. And they can always contact me or my PA through garthhewitt.org.
Garth, thank you so much. Bless you. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Nice to be with you.